what was your initial connection with Rangayana?
I knew Rangayana existed because although I was not interested in theatre to begin with, I'd been reading about Rangayana and Rangayana's activities, but it was so remote a thing for me. I never thought I would ever get in touch with these people because I hadn't even started writing till 1967. I was more interested in music. I was more interested in cinema. I was a great cinema buff. So I didn't know I would ever write plays. Then by an accident, I wrote of an act, and Satyakatha was the most prestigious platform at that time. So I sent it to Satyakatha, and they published it. And they went on publishing my one act, which was very encouraging for a writer. But even then, I never thought that they would be produced or performed. I hadn't heard the word stage worthiness. I thought I was writing literature. During that period, from 1960 to 1967, October was the time when Sultan was published. To 1970 March, Vijaya was away in England on some scholarship, I think. When Vijayabai came back, she contacted Shipu, and Shipu said, here is a new writer, he has written these 5 one acts, read them. That was Holi and Sultan, Nekamata Zakun, etc. So Vijayabai wrote me a letter saying that I would like to perform this in my workshop. I was very happy because I knew Vijayabai's stature, but again, I was reading a lot about Western theatre. I was a teacher of English, so one knew Angelico and Wesker, and they were the icons at that time. So I said, when I heard the word workshop, I said, fine, this seems very interesting. So I wrote her saying that, well, please go ahead and do it. That's how my association with Rangayana started. And when I came here to see the rehearsals of Holi, I suddenly realized that I am in the right company. Because even Vijayabai said that improvisational methods are being used for the first time. And we are taking our theatre into schools and colleges, and because it was performed in college halls with college students participating. There is an instance when it was performed in Powai, and half of the students were furious because they were Marxists. Kumar Ketkar was the leader at that time. Kumar was one of them. He said, who said that students are like that? We are a very constructive people, etc. Another half said, no, what she is showing is right, etc. That kind of a thing. So, and at that time I was not aware of any other experimental activity in Mumbai because I lived in Nagpur, away from Nagpur. Again, it was not my top priority. Theatre was never my top priority, frankly. I wrote, it got published, Vijay was ready to it, Tendulkar wrote about it, and I was quite happy. I never expected any money from theatre because I could see that it's impossible to expect any money. I had a good job. But there must have been other experimental groups at that time in Bombay. I wasn't aware of them. And frankly, I didn't know anything about Satyadev at that time. So when I was introduced to Satyadev in 1970 after the shows of Holi and Sultan Sulabha, and they invited me over for lunch and Dubey was there, I didn't know who he was. I completely ignored him, and Dubey never forgave me for that. He always reminded me that, well, I mean, I remember distinctly, he asked me, who do you think you are? I said, what do you mean? He said, nobody, you are a nobody. I said, thank you very much. I'll remember that helped. But it was only after that I began to get in touch with Dubey. He became a friend because Dubey loved writers. He didn't like human beings maybe, but he loved writers. He defended writers. So it is wrong to say I began to work with Dubey. Dubey chose my texts and
these rehearsals that you went to of Rangayana when they were doing Holi and the other work, where were they being held?
Wilson College, the shows, I mean, I don't have any distinct memory of where they were rehearsed, but I remember the first shows that were done in a small school, college room, class in Wilson College. And the aspirations were not very big. In fact, we never thought of going to a big auditorium, Shivaji or something like that. Rangayan had a faithful following of 500 members and another 100 or two who would stay there and buy a ticket. That was all that we wanted. After that, we would shut the shop and do something else. That was how Rangayan functioned. Because the basic idea of Rangayan was not to do a lot of shows and reach out to people. The basic idea was to learn something in every new production. Once you have learned something, shut it down, do something else, move on.
But you use the word experimental when you just now. Were you aware of these categories at that time? Meaning, were they important categories at that time?
Yes, I was very much aware of it because I told you I was reading a lot about British theatre and American theatre, and I knew what experimental theatre meant in those countries, and I often wondered whether we had anything like that. Rangayan came the closest to these, in Marathi, of course. I don't know what was happening in Bengal at that time or Kerala. In fact, things started happening in Kerala and other states much later.
Much later, yeah.
Things were happening only in Bengal and Maharashtra in 1970. So Rangayan came, and particularly with Holi, it came much closer to what was happening in the West. So I was aware of these categories. And I always considered myself, wrongly or rightly, I'm not a professional in the bad sense of the word. I am not going to sell things. And I'll write when I want to. Will write what I feel like. It may be done, it may not be done, and that kind of a thing.
What was happening in the so-called professional or commercial theatre at that time that you were exposed to? Meaning, I'm just trying to understand the other. When you say this was different, what was the other at that time?
Compared to today's scene, the professional theatre at that time, it was professional or व्यावसायिक, तुला काय इंग्रजी शब्द?
Commercial.
Commercial. It smacks of something, bad. But
mainstream.
Mainstream. I think it was vibrant and it has thrown up some classics. I may have reservations about those plays, but it was extremely dignified. Plays like Himalayची सावली, Natasamrat, Sandhya Chaya, इथे उशाळा मृत्यू, even Prema Tuza Rang Kasa, light comedy, so many plays, Himalayची सावली. I mean, they were full-blooded plays, extremely dignified. There was no compromise when it came to values or how could I describe it? It was an extremely civilized theatre, meaningful also. They believed in what they were doing, and one saw some great acting. I have seen Vijay in many plays, Dr. Lagu in many plays. So it had a dignity of its own, and I never had a quarrel with them on those issues. I respected them. But at the same time, I could see that they had to make certain compromises so that they would be able to reach out to many people.
So you used to see these plays in Nagpur, or you used to see them in?
They used to come to Nagpur. It was economically feasible at that time. It was easy, and actors even at that time lived very simply. They didn't mind living in small lodges. They didn't charge any high fees. There were no tantrums. So it was easy for Nagpurians to invite them, and everything was very modest. Everything was done very modestly. Things have changed now, of course. But I knew that I was a student of English literature. I was reading LB. I was reading Sartre and Camus in translations. And although I come from a very small place, I have always considered myself a person of greater sweep than even Bombay people, many Bombay people, not all, some Bombay people. I knew a lot, I read a lot, so I knew what I wanted to do. I had read existentialism at that time, thoroughly. That definitely influenced me. And when Vijaya picked up my place, I said, yes, now this is my platform. I'll be able to experiment, do what I want to do, because there is somebody who understands the value of what I'm doing. Then I made Dubai. It was a wonderful accident. I have been exceptionally lucky in finding a right publisher and then right directors. But if you ask me if I was aware of other theatre activity going on in Mumbai or in other places, I am sorry to say that I know very little because I was so completely cut off from Mumbai. So things didn't reach Nagpur at that time. One, and secondly, it wasn't really my top priority theatre.
So when did you first hear of Chabildas?
When Chabildas started, because
Right.
I have seen the breakup of Rangayan. No? Rangayan broke up, and immediately afterwards Chabildas came, I think. Chabildas happened. Arvind and Sulabha, I am still friends with them. They started Chabildas, and Rangayan had folded up by that time. Bai had become fully professional or commercial, whatever it is. It was, in fact, it's really funny. This happened in 74 something. Chabilda happened in 73, 74, 75. During that time, I wrote only one play, Party, which was produced by Palekar. And after that, I took a long break, 8 years. I didn't write a single word. So I was not much performed in Chabildas, except Party.
Garbo. Garbo was also performed.
Garbo was performed, but Garbo was performed, I mean the Hindi production.
Hindi production.
Yeah, it was performed in Prithvi also, I think. No, not Prithvi, it wasn't there.
Prithvi was Rakta Pushpa.
Yeah. Prithvi was Rakta Pushpa. Yeah.
Garbo started off by performances at Tejpal and these venues,
Yeah.
which were Dubai.
Where did I see your Garbo?
You must have seen it at Tejpal.
Tejpal. Yes, yeah.
Yeah. That was like kind of the transition period between Dubai had lost Walchand Terrace at that time because that had been given away,
Yeah.
given back to the owners, and Chabildas had not yet come into being. So in between, he was performing in Tejpal. He was performing at Ravindranatya Mandir, wherever he could get. Even Bhaidas, we done a performance of Garbo and Bhaidas one rainy night with 8 people in that 1,000-seater auditorium. So that was the transition period, and then Chabildas happened. So you heard about Chabildas in the context of Rangayan's breakup, and hence Chabildas is formed, or
That's the feeling I got. And by that time I had made friends in theatre, so I knew that Arvind and Sulabha have started this group, and they have found a place, performing plays, etc. etc. Although Arvind personally never approached me for a text or anything. And anyway, I wasn't a prolific writer. But I used to read about plays being done in Chabildas, and I was very curious also about the activity, and I was very happy that the closure of Rangayan is not the end of it all. I mean, there are younger people. Jayadev had appeared on the scene, Rohini, so many people. Whenever I came to Bombay, I made it a point to go and see plays. Paiji Zatiche was done there, Sanguna was done there. So many people. Hindi plays were being done. By that time, I was quite well acquainted with Hindi theatre scene. I mean, Dubey's theatre scene.
Yeah.
I had seen his Hayavadan at the Tejpal, Garbo. We had become friends in fact. So, but again, my knowledge was very limited to these 2 or 3 individuals. Vijaya, Dubey, Arvind Sulabha, that's about it. I had no connection with other people. So, and I was never ever tempted to come to Bombay and be here and be a part of the whole thing, because I knew Bombay is not my cup of tea, and writing was not the top priority ever. So I think I took a very nice decision staying in Nagpur. So I got to know what I wanted to know. Otherwise, I kept away from the scene.
But when you were hearing about Chabildas in Nagpur, was there a kind of, did it seem to, you said you were curious, okay, did it seem to represent something at that time, or was it, oh, okay, here's a new venue where some people are doing plays? Did it seem, because it developed into quite an institution, Chabildas. So I'm just curious to know, in the early days, what did it represent to people outside of Bombay?
What was remarkable about Chabildas, was, I think, it was a platform available to many who wanted to do things, good, bad, new. you know. People who didn't have a chance to find the space could find it here, you know. They could come and perform. It was centrally located. And I think there was some vision behind it. Even at that time, I used to think that yes, Sulabha and Darvind have thought that, well, creating a space and making it available to people who don't necessarily belong to Avishkar, you know, should be given a chance to perform in such a space. That was a tremendous help. It was not just a space available to people, there was definitely some kind of a vision behind it. That was very interesting. Rangayan seemed very exclusive compared to Avishkar. Avishkar, I think, was more open and democratic. Rangayan was a group of seekers, you know, 10 seekers who came together and relentlessly went on their quest. Unfortunately, I mean, for 10 years, I think. And then it broke. If you look at the history of Marathi theatre groups, most of them function only for 10 years. And then there is a breakup. Take any group, up to Theatre Academy. I mean, Theatre Academy exists there for nominally.
Yeah, on paper it is.
But you know, it's 10 years because people grow up, their priority change. What happened is Avishkar allowed the youngsters to come and perform. Not that Chabildas belonged to Avishkar, but there was this attitude of encouraging young people.
Did you ever have a conversation about this with Arvind or
No, never.
This is what you sense. This is what you
No,
saw.
I think I was always considered Vijaya's boy. You know. Unfortunately or fortunately, whatever. But which in a way is true because I mean I vibe so well with Bai even now. I mean we have just to meet and within minutes we communicate things without wasting too many words. So that and Dr. Lagu. So, but then Dr. Lagu did Antigone there, Udvasta Dharmashala. Some very major plays were being done, and that made it what it was. I think it is a very important milestone. It's a very important.
Do you remember the first time you came to that space?
I think it was to have been Paije Zatiche.
What were your impressions?
No, not Paije Zatiche. The Garbo must have been the play because it was in 73, 74. No, I mean, my impression was wonderful, good.
About the, you know, it had a very interesting setting, right? In that little lane outside the other station, you know.
No, it didn't surprise me or shock me because when I was a part of Ranga and we had performed in Topiwala Lane Municipal High School Hall Made. Shabby, illit hall, dirty hall with cobwebs hanging around and all that. And I was very happy. I was very happy because that is exactly what I wanted. I have never been tempted to by large auditors. I think I'm a snob, basically. I shudder at the idea of being performed in Shivaji and 1,000 people coming and clapping. You know, that is something I can't. So I said, lovely. One compared to what we performed in, you know, during Rangayan time, Chabildas was a much better venue.
If you were to describe it to someone who hadn't seen it, okay, the whole experience of being at Chabildas, right from getting there and, you know, getting to the store, how would you describe it? Suppose you, what I'm just very curious.
I would say that I mean when you talk about experimental theatre, you do not expect fancy spaces and you do not expect great lighting and great sets. You do expect that you would walk through lanes and by lanes and reach a small ignored space which is not even known to people, and you have to climb a flight of stairs, 2 or 3 stairs, and then the seats are the most uncomfortable seats in the world. This is expected. This is what happens in New York. You know, if you are going to the off Broadway theatre, or if you go to England and go to French theatre, that is how they do it. I'm not comparing, but this is somehow I knew that this is the way this kind of theatre will be done, must be done. You don't expect comfort or you don't expect fancy places. And Chabildas was exactly like that. In fact, in a way, I was subtly proud that we are like this, you know. I loved the plot. And this is how I would describe it. Chabildas was exactly this. You get off the other station, walk down the road and go to Berlin, flight. There are three flights, stairs, a shabby hall, a lot of noise filtering in, you know, uncomfortable seats. But how does it matter if what you are working is good quality work and doing it with conviction? Most of the plays that I saw there were wonderful experiences.
What was the experience of watching a play there like?
The immediacy of experience, the intimacy of experience, being close to what's happening, be almost a part of what's happening. And I tell you, I somehow never fancied myself in a plush auditorium watching a play. I mean, that is something totally alien to my temperament. I mean, I didn't like the way performing at the Tejpal. It was too elite and too sophisticated for me. No, I said no, not a hi-fi English-speaking audience and doing wow. It's almost like a religious act, you know. It's a sacred act watching theatre. That is the feeling I got in Chabildas during Rangan also. It was a sacred act done in total seriousness. So these externalities didn't matter. They ceased to matter. I remember I came down from Nagpur for the show of Yatanagar, and we went to the Topiwala lane in Girgaon. Vijay Bhai was there. Rekha Kamath and Meena Naik, she was Suktar, they used to act in it. Only one spectator had bought a ticket worth 2 rupees. There was nobody in the auditorium. So finally I and Vijay Bhai and that fellow, we sat together and it was performed. But what a performance it was. The spirit of, we're doing something sacred, you know, this is a religion. That was something which I experienced in Chabildas also. Done beautifully, passionately, without any expectations. I mean, mercenary expectations. कि यहाँ से break मिलेगा, this is stepping stone. These things somehow didn't exist in the minds of people at that time, I think. Nobody thought it is stepping stones towards cinema, or there was no television, of course, at that time. So it was a small world in a way, not known to millions, known to only a few. And it was small in many senses that there was no money, there was no publicity. I mean, Maharashtra Times me evada, you know, we used to get about 8 lines in Maharashtra Times. There were no pull-outs, Sunday pull-outs, you know, with your photographs on glossy paper, nothing like that. So what was it that made us do it? I think it is the intensity and sterling honesty of the experience. We loved that.
Did you feel at that time that you were part of something larger while viewing a play in Chabildas?
No. I never thought in those terms, but I knew that I was with a group, a small group, known to very few people. But this group is doing something as intensely and as seriously as I want it to be done, you know. So that was one bonding. We were together in it with the same conviction, same seriousness. And I was quite happy. किसको पता था कि अपने प्लेस ट्रांसलेट हो गए, कलकत्ता, दिल्ली, बम्बई में हो गए, बाहर हो गए, अमेरिका में, इंग्लैंड में हो गए. I never thought. These things just happened.
Did you feel you were part of a larger theatre movement that seemed to be coming together? Did that sense come across?
No, I don't think it was. I ever considered it a larger theatre movement, but I knew it was an important moment, a significant moment. I also thought at that time, and I think even now, that it always will be a small activity. It will be extremely significant. But its scale would be never as large as the scale of commercial theatres or professional theatres. It will always be in small pockets, and it does influence other theatre, but in a very subtle way and very slowly.
So how would you, when you say that the work, you describe the work as being intense, passionate, almost like a sacred act. How would you define? Did it fit into your broader ideas of experimentalism? I'm sure not all of it, because some of it must have been quite ordinary. But can you give me some examples, just to make it a little more tangible, like of two or three productions, or even one production, which struck you as really, attempting to do something different, for which the ideal space was in fact Chabildas? Is there anything that you remember that then defines what you thought was truly experimental theatre?
No, when you talk about ideal space for something, I don't know what you are trying to say.
No, you said that Chabildas provided a platform. So in that sense, historically, as an accident, two things come
My
together.
contention, Sunil, is if the group that is performing is extremely intensely involved in what they are doing, it hardly matters whether they are performing in Chabildas or Prithvi. Ultimately, my entire attention is focused on those actors. The rest of the things don't bother me. I don't even think about them. But it perhaps would make a difference if the same performance is done at the Shivaji or Ravindra. I would like to see such a performance there. I have seen some extremely, if you are asking me a couple of memorable plays that I have seen, I think Dr. Lagu's Antigone, it hit me there because I was so close to the group. Changuna, Jayadev Changuna, because I had read Lorca and I always wondered whether Lorca's play could work in Marathi, his lyrical quality, etc., etc. And Rohini was new at that time. I think I remember that performance. It was a very good performance. I too was very young, I had not lost my capacity to get moved by what I see. Then Garbo, because in Marathi it had bombed and everybody had considered it a total flop, a miserable failure. And I had accepted, and it is a badly written play in a way. But then I saw Dubey editing it and performing it, and that is where I learned my first lesson into editing. And the intimacy. Dr. Lagu had launched it professionally in big auditoriums. It was bound to fail. But I remember even at that time, I had a call with Dr. Lagu. I was a newcomer. I hardly knew Dr. Lagu, but I used to call and say, this is not for a big auditorium. Do it in small halls. And he said, no, the star cast. Because by that time he had become a complete professional actor, so his habits and priorities had changed. Yeah. It didn't work. Dubey knew what his audience and what his space was. That was the difference.
Yeah.
Dubey edited it heavily and performed it at the right place with the right kind of actor. I didn't want known actors in Garbo when Dr. Lagu did it. Datta Bhatt, Amol Palekar, and then big auditoriums. I said, no, this is not the way I want it to be done. Dubey, that's why, that is what Chabildas did. I have wonderful memories of Chabildas as a spectator, although only one of my plays.
Did you ever participate in conversations with other, theatre people at Chabildas beyond watching a play? Is there a kind of, a kind of more extended relationship with that space?
Hardly, because I used to come here as a visitor, see a play, and maybe later on go for bhaji pav with friends. But it was not a very serious or intense talk. The real sharing has been with Dr. Lagu Vijaybai only in my life. In fact, I have not really sat down and talked about things, theatre with even Arvind and Sulabha or Dubey, yes. These are the only three persons I have really shared ideas with, because I spent a lot of time with them. They used to come to Nagpur, stay with me. In fact, it was in Nagpur that we really had long conversations. But if you are asking me if I have had any conversation or exchange with my contemporaries, I say no. Again, I was completely isolated in Nagpur. That is the reason. And you are a theatre person. Tell me how many people really want to get into really serious, deep queries about theatre. You know, there's a saying, when two painters meet, they don't talk about art, they talk about the cost of paints and brushes. So maybe when theatre people meet, all they talk about is maybe the space nahi hai available, paisa nahi hai, kya khayenge.
Did the experience of viewing plays at Chabaldas and also somewhere, imbibing that atmosphere, as you so beautifully described, the whole, the experience of viewing, did it in any way influence what you wrote later on?
No, because even before Rangayan, I used to think that if at all my plays are done, they will be done in such a place, because I knew there would be only 50 people to see what I am writing, and will not be done in a big auditorium. Even now at this stage, I'll be 73 this October. I have an allergy of big auditoriums, air conditioned plush auditoriums. That is not where I want to be performed.
No, you see, till then you were saying, you were describing that, you were reading a lot of literature, you were reading about, experiments being done in other countries, and then you come to Bombay and
I read Grotowski also by that time.
You had read Grotowski,
Yeah.
right? So what I'm saying is that, and then you come to Bombay, and whether it's Rangayan or later on at Chabaldas, you actually tangibly see it happening. So in a way, it's a kind of a transformation of what you heard and into
exactly.
something which is real, but real in a very Indian way, because this is our thing. So in that sense, Chabaldas was a fairly conventional space. Most people used it as a proscenium theatre, quite conventional. Whatever experiments were done within that. But what I'm trying to ask you is that whether it was the experience of watching it with 40 people, whether it was the actual reality of the Chabaldas space, did it make you in any way see your own writing differently? That purely in terms of craft, if not not necessarily in terms of content, but okay, this is what is possible, this is not possible. These are the kind of actors who are available to us. These are the kind of directors who are working. Did that make any impact at all on you?
No, those things never influenced me, because I never wrote for any specific actors or in specific space. I have to tell you one thing. I have never seen my work outside of proscenium. I have always seen my work in proscenium. I mean, I think the very idea that things, environmental theatre they call, if you want to do.
You saw Rakta Pushp in Thrust space.
Yeah, no, you did it and it worked. That is an added advantage. But when I see it, when I wrote it and when I saw it happening in proscenium.
Oh, you're saying you've always seen it in your mind in a proscenium?
Even now, I do. Because doing a play in the open is not really running away from proscenium, because the viewer always puts a particular frame around the actors. He creates his own space, and that is proscenium. It may not be visible, but it is there. I mean, this is, I think, a sort of self-deception that we are doing, going away from proscenium, and we are doing it in the open. Whatever you do, people will always have to have a proper perspective to look at you, and they will create a frame, and they create a proscenium. Doing theatre, you are writing about mad people, so doing it in lunatic asylum, you are doing it about prisoners, so doing it in jail. I think these are very naive ideas about theatre. What ultimately matters is the immediacy of experience, which you can give in proscenium also, because there is an unspoken dialogue between the spectator and the actor, and if they are both seriously involved, they do communicate the experience. It hardly matters where you are doing it,
I'll give you another why I'm asking this question. For instance, we've been talking to people, say like someone like Girish Karnad, who came to Bombay much earlier. Say he came in the early 60s. Okay, and his exposure to contemporary theatre was at Bhulabhai Memorial Institute, where he saw Alkazi doing his productions, and he talks about the impact it made. In a way, it's quite interesting. The stories are so much parallel because he comes from Dharwad, okay, he comes to Bombay. It's the same thing that you come to the city as a visitor and he goes and sees it. And he is blown by certain staging of the play, the use of artificial lighting. But more importantly, that for the first time he sees that it's possible for theatre to be taken out of drawing rooms, not in terms of where it's performed, but the play itself, and it can also go into outdoor spaces. Okay, I'm just talking about at that time that was the impact in his mind. Similarly, I'm just asking you, were there any such things that impacted you from what you saw at Chabildas?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
In fact, I always was sort of skeptical about things. I mean, like Tughlaq was done by Al-Qazi in the fort, Sabkila. I said, I don't want to go and see there because the actors will be so far away from me.
May not be heard.
I know, I want to watch what is theatre. Theatre for me is the actor. The greatest visual in theatre is the actor. If he is so cut off from you, then how do I share the experience? I can't. That's why a place like Chabildas is ideal. It's small, compact, and is close to you, but not so close to make you, not so close for comfort.
You mentioned the filtering in of outside noises.
Yes.
Yeah. What? It's interesting that you remember that.
I know there has to be cars honking and the feriwalas, sometimes children shouting, crying. There are million sounds, I think. One was completely oblivious of them. Occasionally there was a disturbance, there is no doubt about it. One used to get irritated also, but one had, well, chalo, take it in your stride. It was not exactly an ideal condition, I would have loved it to be absolutely silent, total silence. It was not possible. As it is, we are a noisy people, even if you are given a very, supposing you are given this quiet place, you will immediately create a lot of noise here. But it could be an irritant sometimes. Like you are watching this tremendous scene between Creon and Antigone, and suddenly somebody shouts there, "Hey, bada wala!" Switch off. And what I loved about it was people who really mattered to me, would come to Chabildas and see. Adyarangacharya would come and see what's happening there. People like that, Shivu Bhagwat. So I used to be happy that I'm a part of this happening, a very important happening. Although my contribution was very small.
When did it, at that time, perhaps as you were saying, you were watching plays, you were sort of, participating as a viewer, as a playwright. Was there a point where the significance of, those 7-8 years of Chabildas, it ran for longer, but really the first 7-8 years were the most important. Did you start making sense in your mind that, if you look at the history of contemporary theatre in Bombay, or in Maharashtra, or even in India for that matter, then Chabildas, those years, the Chabildas years are significant. When do you think that kind of, an understanding of that space started beginning to become clear to everybody?
There's a word which is used in Marathi, Chabildas movement, Chabildas Chalwal. Rangayan was a movement. Avishkar also was a movement, but I don't know whether it was Chabildas movement. It was a space available to all people who wanted to do something serious, honest. It was a movement for about 10 years maybe. Later on, all and sundry came and performed there, which was bound to happen. Sasti milti hai jagah jao karo. So one saw some very indifferent, some bad productions there. But that is a major period which you cannot ignore it, If you are going to write about the 70s, most of the important plays were done. Dubai ke workshop ke jo plays the, Udvasta Dharmashala, Garbo, Vasnaka, they were all done there. So Dubai's contribution to the Chabildas movement also is not negligible.
So would you say that the space helped in kicking off a certain activity, or would you say that there was a lot of stuff people were thinking at that time needed a space and Chabuldas came in handy? Okay, well, it historic.
I think the very fact that such a place is available was very reassuring to people who could not afford other places. I don't know if anybody wrote for that particular space. I don't know. I have no idea. Ratnakar's plays were produced there. So many other writers, but I don't know whether those particular people had this particular space in their mind when they wrote. But people knew that if they wrote something, a group knew that well they will have to perform in Chabildas. It's available. That was reassuring. Had it not been available, people probably wouldn't have done many plays.
That's the question I'm asking. The availability of the space actually kicked off activity.
Absolutely. It definitely was helping, although not triggering off, but it was definitely helping people, encouraging people to do what they wanted. And that was the only place at that time. Can you imagine?
So then going to a more fundamental question, in your view, how important is a space, in the context of a theatre movement? How important is a space? I mean, for instance, let's look at your own town, in your own city, in Nagpur. Like in Pune, you have Sudarshan, which has become a kind of a place where a lot of young people have been able to perform. In Bombay, you had a Chabildas. To some extent, for the non-Marathi theatre, Prithvi became such a space, in the. How important is a space, in your opinion?
No, I mean, I want to ask you whether you are asking me the meaning and significance of space in theatre or space for performers or groups.
I'm saying that whatever the space's shape, form may be, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about a home for, like Chabildas became a home for a kind of theatre, Prithvi became a home, Sudarshan has become that way. I'm saying, how important is the space in a theatre movement?
I think in Mumbai it is very important because it's very difficult to get space, Once you get it, a lot of people are drawn to it and they want to use it, exploit it. But when people in Nagpur complain about their non-activity, saying there is no space, I really, can't stop laughing because they are on the road I live nearby, There are at least 20 halls empty the whole year. All of them want to perform Basnaro Deshpande. The rent is 13,000 rupees per year. I said, why do you want those auditoriums? Why do you want those auditoriums? There is Bhagini Mandal Hall, there is University Hall, there is Andhra Association Hall. There are about 12 to 15 halls on one road, conveniently located, no trappings. And you can get them cheap, maybe sometimes free. So what are you complaining about? In fact, had I been an active person like Dubey, I would have organized a group and I could have performed in a given hall for the whole year. Who is stopping you? The very fact that you complain about space means we really don't want to do anything, or we have a wrong idea of space. Space is not all the air-conditioned, fashionable spaces, particularly for the kind of theatre we are doing. In Mumbai, it's very difficult, and theatre people in Mumbai know what is involved. So, Chabildas becomes precious to them. But in small towns, when they complain about non-availability of space, I think it's all hogwash. Enough space is available. Why don't you perform on terraces? We have big houses, My terrace can easily seat about 100 people. Why not perform there? People have done theatre like that, Al-Qazi and Lake, and they have performed on terraces. So space is where we create it. If I am really serious, I could do my play anywhere, in a go down, in a ramshackle schoolroom, anywhere. It hardly matters where I perform, as long as I get 10 spectators. And Chabildas was just that, no nonsense kind of place. I had reservations about Prithvi. I said, too fancy, Baba. And well, दुबे के दोस्त है, दुबे जरा वो एलिट सर्कल में घूमता है तो करो, रक्त पुष्प करो, देखा, अच्छा भी हुआ. Some wonderful work, but अजूनही मला, even now, I have reservations and the kind of plays that are being done there. Well, that is not my idea what theatre is.
Yeah, but you see that there is also this argument that, that for a work to do more, complex work, to push the boundaries a little bit more, it also helps to have some resources. It helps to have a few better lights. It helps to have,
Exactly. No. I mean, I can understand
that.
the economic aspect of it. If they want to run a place like that, they have to have a regular source of income. And they have to rent it out to people.
No. I'm saying that as theatre people, like at this point now, after 35 years of doing theatre, I do want to work with more than 10 lights. I do want to work with a little more resources than what I did 30 years ago. That's what I'm trying to say. So, and so we do see a virtue in spaces which are a little more comfortable, both for the performers and for the actors, without, of course, going overboard and, you don't need the really fancy trappings, but beyond what we used to work with. Definitely, there is an argument for that. And it's really up to you whether you let it impact your work or let it dilute your work or make your work better. That's really eventually, up to you. I mean, you can go into the fanciest place and do very good work, or you can go into the most ramshackle place and do very bad work. That's also possible. So eventually it's in your head. That's what I'm saying.
I find Prithvi a bit too elitist and fashionable.
Yeah,
Going to Prithvi is a fashion. Going to Shabil was maybe
also a fashion.
Also fashion, inverted strawberry thieves maybe.
Of course. Jennifer has to be thrilled to come to Chabildas because it was so exotic, She had never seen anything like this.
No, and she knew that tradition of experimental theatre from England. I mean, वहाँ के तो ग्रुप ऐसे ही कहा. मैंने मैरोविड्स का एक नाटक देखा जिसमें जेनेट सुजमन थी. Can you imagine? कहाँ लंदन की किसी गली में इट वाज सॉर्ट ऑफ रेस्टोरेंट कम एक्टिंग स्पेस. रेस्टोरेंट च्या मागे एक्टिंग स्पेस. अबाउट 50 people could sit there. It was a hilarious play. I will never forget that evening. The involvement of 3 actresses. स्मेल येत होतं इकडून तिकडून घाणेरडे कॅबेज सूपचा स्मेल, कॉफीचा स्मेल. I mean, one wouldn't expect Janet Suzman to perform there, but people there do. It was a Marowitz production. Only 50 people in the auditorium. So, तिला हे सगळं माहीत होतं जेनिफरला. Chabildas was probably closer to her heart. Prithvi is an ideal place to perform, and I'm quite sure the actors enjoy performing there. But वहाँ अंग्रेजी नाटक होते हैं तुम्हारे. मुझे क्या लेना देना. शॉ का नाटक नसीरुद्दीन कर रहा है. मुझे हाउ डज इट. कुठलं तरी अननोन शॉचं नाटक, कुठलं तरी अननोन चेकॉवचं नाटक, थिन प्ले, नॉट अ व्हेरी गुड प्ले, बिंग डन इन इंग्लिश. ते काहीतरी प्रेस्टिजियस होऊन जातं ते तुम्ही तिथे करता ते. मला काही ते रस नाही बाबा. आय एम टू मराठी आय थिंक. ऑल्दो माय विजन इज क्वाइट इंटरनॅशनल.
No, I understand. I mean, that critique is a valid critique. I mean, there's no question about it. It's also what is the transformation of theatre into a product of entertainment. That's been the most significant change that has taken place since the Chabildas days that you're talking about and what you're talking about today. There's a huge transformation where now it's a product of entertainment. So it is packaged in that way, it's sold in that way, not just by you. But the mainstream media will take you over and select like that because they also need material, na?
Yeah.
So it's very attractive for them to pick up a play and make it into an entertainment product because that's more material for them. So that's a huge transformation. Within that, to find a path that allows you to work without compromising too much is the challenge. It's the big challenge to me. It's a big challenge to me. So anyway, that's how it is.
I don't know, like I have written a play, I don't know whether you have read it. Eka Natacha Mrityu, an actor exits. Its translation is available in the OUP volume. If you read that play, you will realize that you cannot expect this to be performed in a big auditorium. It has to be a small auditorium. Maybe I like experimental theatre, NCPK. I find it an extremely ideal place. And somehow it is different from Prithvi. I don't know how to explain this difference. पण काहीतरी वेगळं आहे तिथे. I would like that kind of a space, people sitting on 3 sides and the actor in the midst and performing. There are about 200 people watching it. I can very well understand that people who are doing theatre naturally want to experiment with props and lightings and this and that. Yes, but for me, it's a very subjective response to the situation.
Fair enough, absolutely.
For me, great theatre can be done only under one bulb of 1000 watt.
Of course.
Because for me, the only important person in theatre is the actor. I should give him a text which is full of possibilities for him to decipher, spaces, empty spaces, and he would do that under one bulb and people would connect.
Absolutely.
बाकी काही नको मला थिएटरमध्ये. I think I want to get starker and starker. But this is very personal and subjective, so limited. Other people want to do other things, many other things, and they are as valid, as legitimate. I have no quarrel with them. So you need spaces like this. And असं बोलत असताना सुद्धा म्हणजे कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन तशी माझ्या याच्यामध्ये देर इज अ कॉन्ट्रडिक्शन वेन आय स्पीक लाईक दिस वेन आय राईट अन ॲक्टर एक्झिट्स वेल देर इज इनफ वर्क फॉर लाइटिंग वाला. So we need extremely sophisticated lighting for that production. Where do I get it if not पृथ्वीलाच मिळणार ते किंवा NCPला मिळणार, nowhere else. You can't perform it in Chavidas Hall now because it is going to require at least 50 lights, 100 lights. So I mean, there are many contradictions in me also. But my ideal is this.
Sure.
Just imagine Dr. Lagu performing under one light. It would hardly matter. I mean, if Socrates पाहिलेलं आहे ना, for it's a monologue for 40 minutes. Whether he performs it in Chabildas or Prithvi or Shivaji, it hardly matters. Everything melts away. All that remains is the actor and the words. That is theatre.
Recently, we performed at the Shakespeare Globe Theatre in London.
Yes.
In daylight, at 2:30 in the afternoon with sunlight. It was magical.
That was Gitu was telling me about it. I'm going.
That not the play in which Gitu was. I did another play.
Which one?
I did All's Well That Ends Well in Gujarati.
Acha.
I have a production called Maro Piyu Gayo Rangoon in Gujarati, which is All's Well That Ends Well. We did a full adaptation. So that was also performed in the same festival. So 2:30 afternoon show in daylight. Beautiful. No problem at all. It's like, like you rehearse with full costume. You can watch a rehearsal at any time of the day, and if it's a good rehearsal, you can get completely involved. That's all. Except that there was 1,500 people watching. That's all.
I had seen Midsummer's Night Dream in Regent's Park.
Right.
It was extremely enjoyable.
Yeah.
But then I asked myself, would it make any difference if I saw it in the proscenium? I said no. Because initially, ठीक है, झाडं, बिडं, green, lawn, etc., खुली हवा. But ultimately, after about 10 minutes, my entire attention was on the actors. This is bound to happen.
It takes over. The play takes over. Sure.
So कशासाठी तुम्ही जाता बगीचात? कशासाठी उगीच त्रास आहेत ना ऑडिटर्स. The real bonding of the spectator and the actor is a totally different issue. When Dr. Lagu did Ghar Deta Ka Ghar in Natasamrat, which is not really a great play, but that particular passage, everybody was instantly connected with that person. You talked about Bhulabai Desai and Balchan Terrace. For me, these are just names, because I had nothing to do with theatre at that time. I started writing very late at the age of 28.
No, but it's very interesting that, your work has been performed at Chabildas. So for us, it was very interesting to get your view of Chabildas. It's fascinating.
Even now, I would love to perform in Chabildas.